In a landmark decision, the United States has put an end to Title 42. This is the polarizing policy that allowed the rapid expulsion of migrants at the U.S. border. This move is a significant shift from the stance held in March of 2020, where the policy was first introduced under the public guise of health concerns concerning the COVID-19 pandemic. But this release has opened up a flood of questions, backlash. Many are concerned about what the next steps are. And as we speak right now, migrant groups, humanitarian rights activists, and international observers are keeping a close eye on the aftermath of this decision. And with me, I'm so glad that I have a special guest joining us, a true champion for justice and equality, Ms. Haddy Gassama. She is the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Undocu Black Network. Haddy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let me just first start off with Secretary Mayorkas, Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, joined the White House briefing room this week and talked about what was going to happen as this unfolded, wanting to ensure the American public that the border is going to be secure, that they're increasing security at the border and trying to fix any of the woes that are coming as they put out this new plan for asylum. What were your first thoughts when the White House released this new plan?
I think our first thought as an organization was just, again, disappointment, but also expected disappointment, in the sense that the Biden administration has now in its tenure, in its first term, has, for all intents and purposes, really failed migrants, immigrant communities in particular, and specifically Black migrant communities. As you mentioned, Title 42 is a Trump-era policy. You know, it's the brainchild of known white supremacist Stephen Miller, amongst some of Trump's other advisors, to decisively keep Black and brown people out of this country. COVID was just a convenient excuse to implement this policy. And so the fact that the Biden administration came in and let this policy go on much longer than it should have, instead of terminated in day one, was a key issue. And then we understand once they did express their intent to end it, yes, there were some legal challenges, but nonetheless, Title 42 was an illegal and immoral policy. So there's really no technical need to replace it, let alone replace it with something even more harsher, such as the Asylum Ban, which is what the Secretary, DHS, and the Biden administration have decided to do, is to end one policy and replace it with something even more harmful.
It said our concern is that migrants from majority Black countries in the sub-Saharan Africa and Caribbean often make the harrowing journey to the U.S. southern border on foot. And due to visa interview backlogs and high visa denial rates, these migrants fleeing harm have no option but to flee their countries and traverse South and Central America to seek asylum in the U.S. And when I was communicating with your organization earlier in the week, one of the major concerns is the treatment of Black migrants at the border. Can you explain more about the concern that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key concerns that we have is Biden's asylum ban essentially says if you've entered or into the United States or found your way to the southern border by crossing other countries, but you did not seek asylum in those countries, you are ineligible to then seek asylum in the US. The issue here is that Black migrants are not safe in those countries that they traverse through. It's a two-pronged thing. The first one is they're not safe in their countries. That's why they're making this dangerous journey in the first place to get to the southern border. So there's this need, and they're well within their international human right to seek safety and refuge in the United States, and to allow for due process to go on, where then the U.S. can decide whether their case does in fact merit an asylum approval. what is happening is that the Biden administration is not even letting them get to that place where they can even apply and let the process take place as to whether or not they can, they would be approved for asylum. We've heard stories of people being sexually assaulted, murdered in some cases, as well as extorted and physically harmed in other ways as they make their way to the southern border. My supervisor, as I said, our executive director, is at the border right now as we speak. And she is, telling us stories of people who've been stuck in Mexico for months waiting for CBP1 appointments. And the app isn't working. The app isn't recognizing their Black faces. And so what then happens is these people are stuck in Mexico, no jobs, because no one's giving you any kind of work because you're Black. Unless you're working with an NGO, no one is actually helping you. So you're having to fend for yourself, for shelter and food just to survive, while at, really at the mercy of cartels and other dangerous entities at play. So the point we are making is that South America, Central America, and Mexico, for the most part, are not safe places for these Black migrant communities. And so to ask that they seek asylum in these places, get denied, and then try to seek asylum in the US is, it just makes no sense. And it's something that we think the Biden administration is aware of, but they're making the conscious decision to still move forward with this harmful ban.
Now, I want to go back because you said something that I don't want to skip over, and that's about the CBP1 app. And many may not know that many Black advocates, organizations that were working with migrants were saying that they could not even get an appointment because it doesn't recognize darker faces. So it's kicking them out and it's prohibiting them. And so we're talking about bias in a system that is supposed to help. Do you know if that glitch still exists?
Yeah, as early as a few hours ago, I believe that glitch still exists from what I'm hearing from our executive director at the border. The CBP1 app is essentially designed to be the mechanism that helps people get an appointment to then go through a port of entry to see whether or not they would pass a credible fear interview and get their asylum process started. What has happened is, because this is, technology, first of all, in order to even use it, you have to have access to a phone. You have to have access to reliable internet service. The better and more updated your phone is, the likelier you are to be able to use the app. And on top of that, you have to take a photo of yourself to prove your identity. And what's happening there is that the app, unless you have perfect lighting, which most of these people don't because they are in a shelter, it's, all hours of the day, it's not recognizing darker skin tones. And as far as we know, that glitch is still going on, as well as other various error messages. The last thing I'll also say about CBP1 is that it's hard to get those appointments. They run out like that. Like internally, we say CBP1 appointments are like getting Beyonce concert tickets. It is just they literally, people wake up, at the crack of dawn, ready to see whether or not they'll get an appointment, and within minutes, they're all gone. So it's just, in any way you look at it, just an inefficient and unfair system to try to process asylum.
Now, Secretary Mayorkas has said that they are upping the amounts. I believe it was like 700 something before. Now it'll be 1,000 a day. But when you look at the numbers of people who are trying to get in, you can't really compare that. It's still at a deficit. Another issue that talking with different organizations is that there is this push for these cases to go through really quickly, to be expedited. So when they do happen, it happens so fast that people aren't able to find counsel. Like, there's a myriad of different things that that the administration really hasn't specifically responded to. Another worry that I've heard is that when you look at Texas, you have Governor Greg Abbott that is also upping his own law enforcement. So you're going to have federal jurisdiction and state jurisdiction there, and people are wondering, in a state like Texas, a Republican-led state, what treatment can they expect, and are we going to see more? And I know you can talk about the documented cases we've seen of racism, but how far are we going to go with these inequities in this system?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make such a good point. When Secretary Mayorkas, mentions this idea of expediting the process, that's expedited removal, not, just necessarily making it easier and quicker for someone to get asylum. Because they're putting this on such a fast track, it actually gives people, as you mentioned, very little time to even seek counsel or legal representation to help them navigate this very complex immigration legal system. So that's the one thing, is people are being apprehended, detained, and deported back to dangerous conditions fairly quickly without giving them their due process right of actually going through the asylum process as they should. And as you said, once they are within the system, or if they're lucky enough to even enter the country, there's this whole other backdrop going on of just these fear-mongering narratives. Like, there's the usage of the language like surge at the southern border. Just today, there was a photo that I believe several conservative papers picked up. I think it was like a drone photo of several mostly Black migrants saying that, oh, now that Biden has lifted Title 42, here's this crowd of Black migrants getting ready to enter the United States. And the fact of the matter is, again, our executive director was actually at that very shelter that photo was taken. Most of those people have been there for months, waiting for their CBP1 appointments to work. So it's not like this magic surge where people just pop up out of nowhere at the southern border. The deterrence policies that the Biden administration is choosing to implement is actually what's creating a lot of this so-called chaos. It is manufactured chaos and crisis, and it does not need to be the case. The United States has the resources to orderly process these people in efficient enough amount of time while still letting them exercise their right to seek safety. We've seen it done with Ukrainian migrants at the very beginning of that conflict, where the country used its resources and manpower to have people and personnel go to the southern border and in an orderly fashion process tens of thousands of Ukrainian migrants into the US without any commotion or chaos. It's so I think what I would say is it again is a matter of choice, not so much a matter of our hands are tied or it's just too chaotic, we need to do something. They are making the deliberate effort to focus on deterrence rather than welcoming these asylum seekers in a humane and dignified manner.
And can you talk about the work? We've gone down what's been happening right before our eyes and the propaganda behind it. This is a big issue that none of the administrations have been able to tackle effectively. What is the work that Undocu Black is doing, and what is the message that you want people to know?
Sure. I mean, Undocu Black's tagline is that immigration is a Black issue. And what that means is that immigration is a racial equity issue. Black immigrants, such as myself, exist. Black asylum seekers exist. Black DACA recipients exist. Black TPS holders exist. And what I think we need to do is really look at this so-called issue of immigration from a lens of equity. And I, again, bring up the Ukraine example, not to shame the administration for their response there, because they absolutely did what they were supposed to do. This is a population of people fleeing armed conflict who needed safety. What we are simply saying is that the same rights afforded to those blonde-haired, blue-eyed people needs to be afforded to brown and Black people seeking refuge many of whom from very similar, if not worse, situations as folks escaping the Ukraine conflict. So Undocu Black does this work, obviously through, speaking to, wonderful media outlets such as your own and getting the story out there just to wake up the American public that this is happening. But also we engage with the government. We very actively participated in the comment period and were part of the coalition to get more than 50,000 people to submit comments to the US government telling them that this asylum ban should not become law. The administration ignored all 50,000 of those. I was
gonna say, like,
move forward with it. That's a different conversation for another day, but that's kind of the sort of advocacy that we do. And we also work closely with our champions on the Hill to try to seek out any kind of legislative solutions that can give people protection, and the people who are already in the country some form of relief and protection. We work closely with the Congressional Black Caucus to ensure that they're also raising their voice on this matter.
Can we expect something more like, I mean, it just ended, there are worries everywhere. What can we expect with the work that you're doing in so many other organizations and working with Congressional Black Caucus? I know that the ACLU has a lawsuit out right now. Other organizations are suing. So what do you think is going to happen with all of this?
Well, the good thing, and one of my favorite things about policy, is that you can implement a policy and you can also retract it. And for the Biden administration, it is not yet too late. Like I said, more than 50,000 people submitted comments telling them this was not a good idea. And that happened within a matter of, I believe, 30 days after they gave people notice that they were considering this proposal. I think what that shows is, for most of the American public, this idea of not helping people who are in need, or at least not letting people just go through the process. Again, this is like an entry ban. It's not even just like we've let you apply for asylum and you didn't get it. It's, we're not even going to let you. We're going to disqualify you before you even get the chance to apply.
How do you feel like it mimics the intent and consequences of Title 42?
Title 42 was exactly the same thing. It was like, you show up at the border and we put you on the next deportation flight. We only call them expulsion flights because they don't even go through the process to get an actual deportation order. But it's the same thing where you're, again, right at the entry point of the country, blocking someone's international human right to seek asylum. And I think what is also important to point out is that the Biden administration, Biden himself, is on record saying, that this is ridiculous, that someone cannot seek asylum on American soil. We have actual videos and voiceovers of him saying that exact quote. So it's not that they're unaware that the U.S. has domestic law and international law obligations to not turn away people who are seeking safety, but to let them go through the process and let the process decide whether or not they're approved for asylum or not. They know that. So the excuse of ignorance is not the case. The excuse of, there will be a huge surge of people at the border is also not the case. What it feels like and why it feels more frustrating with this administration is that it seems they are leaning heavily into Republican talking points around this idea of we're being replaced by a swarm of Black and brown people invading the country. It seems that instead of, sticking to what they said during their campaign trail days of saying, we believe in human rights, we believe in a fair and equitable justice system as it relates to immigration, they're saying, yeah, you know what, those people might be onto something. Maybe there is going to be a surge of people at the southern border. What can we do to make it seem like we're not soft on immigration? And what ends up happening is Black and brown people are, as always, harmed in the process of this kind of political back and forth.
Right. It's always a conversation in the background that we talk about, even when it came to Ukraine and we saw Black folks fleeing from Ukraine, like we see this and this separate issue. Y'all really, I mean, it's crazy, but it is to be expected, unfortunately. But I thank you for the work that Undocu Black is doing. Um, you're there in the detention centers. You're hearing. Thank you for sending me the reports on the complaints that are coming through. That a lot of times we're not talking about in the media. That's why I specifically wanted to have this interview with you, because it is inhumane. We've been talking about the the surge in officials that they're going to have. They're putting more border patrols out, but I really haven't heard as much on what are you doing on the humanitarian side. What are you doing about the overcrowding, about the housing, about the food, about the communication? What are you doing about people who've been separated from their children? These are the humane issues that we have been talking about, and it is almost that law and order talk again that we hear, even when it comes to dealing with Black and brown people here in the U.S. And I think it is proving to be a detriment. And we have to go past that and talk about the humanity of these people and why many are fleeing. And if the U.S. was honest, many of these places people are fleeing. The U.S.'s hands have been dirty in some of these countries.
Yep, very much so.
But I digress. Haddy, thank you so much for coming and talking about this ongoing issue. Please keep us updated on what you know, what we're not hearing every day, what's not being reported, because you all are on the ground. Thank you for the work of Undocu Black. And I'll give you just the last words to leave with our audience.
Thank you so much, again, just for making space for this important conversation. The last thing I will say is exactly what I said before, is that the beautiful thing about policy is that just as they can be implemented, they can be retracted. And for the Biden administration in particular, it is not too late to, take a step back and look at this and really retract it and fall back on the campaign promises you've publicly made, which is that, you would usher in an equitable, fair, and humane immigration system. And also on the racial equity piece, that you wanted to be the president that restored this idea of racial equity. You wanted to be the Black people's president. And right now you are failing Black people, you are failing Black immigrants by the choices that you're making. But it is not too late to go back on it and do right.
Haddy Gassama, Undocu Black, Director of Policy and Advocacy. Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you on again.
Thank you.